On today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, do we feel like the Houston Texans can walk into Jacksonville and firmly get a win? I'm not so sure. But we are also joined by PFF's own Dalton Wasserman.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Battle Red Nation. I'm your Texans football analyst and Texans credentialed media member, John Hickman, alongside the man with the big hat and the even bigger smile, Brian Big Sars Bearfield. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day and for being an everydayer. You guys are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We will have a good conversation with Dalton Wasserman of PFF. We're going to look at it. Is this team just broken, or is it just the offense that's broken? And maybe there's some blessings in disguise that can happen for the Houston Texans as they get ready for the bye week after they take on the Jacksonville Jaguars. But Big Sarge and I kicked the show off talking about our thoughts heading into Sunday's matchup. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Big Sarge, you got a team in Houston that is desperate for a win, desperate to get the funk out of them, desperate to get over their Titans loss. And then you got a team in Jacksonville with a head coach coming out and saying, I made some changes. Up and down status with Trevor Lawrence. A team that at this point should probably commit to the tank. Your thoughts heading into Sunday's matchups is
the Houston Texans have to have the mindset of walk into your trap, take over your trap. They got to walk in there and they just got to go in there and do what they need to do, and that is beat a team that they're supposed to beat. We cannot have another New York Jets game. We cannot have another Tennessee Titans game. You got to walk in there and you got to beat this Jacksonville Jaguars team. And John, I'm going to be honest with you. There's not going to be any confidence being built by beating the Jacksonville Jaguars and then going into the bye week like you do. There's nothing, John, outside of getting a win in the AFC South, getting closer to winning the AFC South title. There's nothing that they can do unless they're going to put up 30-plus points in the second half. And now you're looking at, okay, so have you finally fixed those second half deficiencies that you have on the offensive side of the ball that we talk about ad nauseum every day on the Locked On Texans podcast?
I'm sick of it.
I'm tired of hearing me say it, but you cannot overlook that. That's one of the glaring problems and the issues that they have. So if they truly want to be who they are, get this win, go into the bye week, make some changes, and then come out. Because this is the first time, John, that in his going on 2-year coaching career, I've never heard head coach D'Amico Ryan say that a loss was tough to get over. And he said this past week that loss to the Tennessee Titans, that one is going to be hard to get over. And he knows it because it's the second game that he knows that his team is the better team. They are the better team, John. They just got to have the mindset of being the better team.
That was the conversation you and I had heading into this 3-game stretch against Dallas, Tennessee, and now Jaguars. Hey, they should go 3-0. They should be able to create some rhythm. They should be able to get that tempo going offensively. We should see multiple touchdowns in the second half. They should be able to beat up on some bad teams to get their morale back to where they should be as they get prepared after that bye week to take on Miami, Baltimore, and Kansas City, and then Baltimore on Christmas. But since that didn't happen against Tennessee and they lost in the fashion that they did, once again, it's taking the defense in the second half to score points, and your offense is just standing around with their hands in the pockets trying to figure out what they want to do and what they want their identity to be. The thought for me right now is if they win, they win. If they lose, it will be expected. There's no expectations for this team right now until they show me otherwise. And I think that when you go up against a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that traditionally plays the Houston Texans tough, if they don't have Trevor Lawrence, they should win this game easily, even if they did have Trevor Lawrence. But if they don't have Trevor on Sunday, they roll out Mac Jones. I would expect defensively for them to create a couple of turnovers. Mac Jones is a statue at times in that pocket, so they should get a few sacks. But it's going to come down to, do I believe the Houston Texans offense can score points in the second half?
Ain't that sad, John?
And right now, I don't believe they will.
I didn't mean to cut you off, John, but that's sad? Coming into this season, John, we would have never said, hey, man, you think that the Houston Texans are going to have a chance to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars? No, we were probably looking at, hey, man, look, we know Jacksonville made some changes and they're a pretty good team, but this Houston Texans team should beat them. This when you were doing the preseason predictions, you didn't look at it and say, excuse me, ooh, that could be a game they could potentially lose. And so, no, John, it's sad that we have to go through something like this.
Yeah. And that's just where the Houston Texans are right now. I mean, the fan base feels that way.
Yeah.
You got a lot of people saying, I'll see y'all next season. And I'm like,
what?
The playoffs is right here.
Playoffs.
and then that's what I got back. I got the
Jim Moore.
Yeah, the playoffs. So it's kind of like people are just overlooking the fact that this is still a team that leads their division. But again, when you get excited for something and it don't happen the way you think it's going to happen, the disappointment starts to set in, and now you kind of get used to it. I think Texas fans right now are just used to being losers. And what's sad is you are still a winning team. They got more wins than they got losses. But when you lose against some of these teams like you've lost, a lot of these games are one-score games, and you think about the amount of one-score games that they are losing, even the ones that they are winning. How many times do we sit back and say, man, all your offense had to do is give you one in the second half? Just give them one. All you got to do is just get – and even in Dallas, it took them all the way up until the end part of the fourth quarter to get that one.
Right.
So we've seen it over and over again. And Sarge, I think a lot of us in the Texan space, but specifically here on the show, we've come up with every excuse and reasoning to find a way to make it work. It ain't working. So until I see it work, my thoughts is, you got to prove me wrong. I don't believe you. You need more people. That's how I feel right now about the Texans. And
yeah, John. And look, I'm gonna be honest with you. If the Houston Texans lose this game to the Jacksonville Jaguars, you know what a lot of these Texans fans are gonna be saying?
Turn the TV
off. They're not gonna want to see that anymore, John. Listen, you got to put a good product on the field. Nobody's gonna want to see that anymore, man.
Well, Sarge, really quick, just before we move on to the interview with Dalton Wasserman, if you could pinpoint something that, if you could say, you know what, I need to call John and say, you know what, they did something. Them boys, they doing something. They shutting you up. They do. What would it be for you to be like, I gotta call John, or I gotta tweet this off so Texan fans can see that the Houston Texans did something right? And I don't want just the old score in the second half. But what is something that you say, you know what, if they do this, okay, maybe the tide has turned a little bit. Five. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
You remember when Kobe did that? When somebody was talking trash to him, he was on the bench,
I think it was Klay Thompson.
And he did that, and he said, and he did that.
I remember.
I need this many touchdowns from CJ. That's the only way I will be excited. Nico has 2, Tank has 1, Mechie has 1, and Schultz has 1. It can't be this. It can't be this. Got to be this, John. I need to see that, because I think that if he gets that amount of touchdowns, and I'm sorry, you all, for those.
By the way, he said 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, I said 5 touchdowns. I did the 5 on my hand for the audio listeners. John, anything less than 5 touchdowns, I'm going to be unimpressed. 5 touchdown passing game from CJ Stroud.
The conversation around the entire city of Houston is Bobby Slug has broken CJ Stroud. He's broken this offense. So Dalton Wasserman will be joining the show to talk about whether or not this is a broken team or broken offense, and what can the Houston Texans do differently to kind of change their season around. But Texan fans, I know this hasn't been the greatest of seasons for a lot of you guys. Although this is one of the better defenses in the NFL, you can make a case this may be the best defense in Texans history. You can make that case. However, offensively, it ain't booming like you thought it would be. So some of these games are boring for you. Well, Prize Picks definitely can create the excitement that you're missing on Sundays while you watch your team just kind of wither away in the second half. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to everybody. You pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Prize Picks is running your game all season long, so go run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Download the app or visit them online. What I like about Prize Picks, the insurance policy. The insurance policy for the Prize Picks, they allow you to keep your lineup in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup alive. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million users. You can sign up today to get in on the action. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out even if your lineup isn't perfect. That's my favorite, really, honestly. I ain't always perfect. And when I'm not always perfect, I can leave with something. What does Dizel say? I'm leaving with something. Prize Picks allows you to leave with something. And so you definitely want to check out Prize Picks today. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Again, sign up today by downloading Prize Picks on your phone or visiting the website, prizepicks.com, and get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 bet. Prize Picks, run your game. Also, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers, this is a great time to allow you into a world of skylight frames. If you're missing someone this holiday season and you want them to be a part of the festivities in your life from afar, Skylight Frames has you covered. They got the perfect gift for you. Skylight Frame is a touchscreen digital photo frame your whole family can use and will love. Upload thousands of photos with your phone and watch them appear in seconds. It's easy to set up. Setup takes less than 60 seconds, so you're looking at maybe a minute of your time to set it up. It only takes a tap on your phone to send new photos to a frame across the country. So we can send Coco some. For the holidays, it's for the holiday time, right?
Sure.
It's the fastest and easiest way to keep loved ones in the loop of your life, especially around the holiday time. They'll feel so much more connected to you with Skylight Frames. The photos are displayed in HD, in an HD resolution, and you can choose from 5 different frame styles. Set it up in portrait or landscape mode, whichever you like the most. Skylight Frame is definitely where you need to visit. As of right now, they're offering our listeners, $20 off your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/NFL. That's skylightframe.com/NFL. Get $20 off your first purchase now at skylightframe.com/NFL. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. As promised, Dalton Wasserman of PFF is joining the show to talk Texans football. And I think the perfect way to kick it off is talking about a former employee of PFF, looking at Bobby Slowik, now the offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans. Are the Texans offense broken right now with Bobby Slowik calling the plays, or is it, in your opinion, more so a franchise structure issue that the entire team may be broken?
It's a little strange because you've got this thing now with, with their offense and even defensively where it is a flawed roster, right? I think between the interior pass protection, some of the injuries you've seen at receiver, and then, with all the difficulties, a little bit of regression from CJ Stroud, not some disastrous thing where he's not your franchise quarterback, but he's missing some throws he normally wouldn't miss. And the thing I'm most curious about is the difference in this offense between the first half and the second half of games. This year, in the first half of games, they've still been a top 5 offense, and then it drops all the way to the bottom 5 or 6 in the second half. In their last 6 games, they've had 30 second half drives and only scored 1 touchdown. I'm not sure what's going on with halftime adjustments or a lack thereof. But that's the biggest problem to me right now is they're not scoring at all. They're not manufacturing drives in the second half of these games. And you're seeing it's keeping teams in games, right? The Tennessee game that they just lost, they only scored 3 points on offense. You have to continue to stay on the gas, especially if your defense needs you to, and they're not stepping up either. I'm just curious why this Texans offense is slowing down so much late in these games.
What are you seeing from CJ Stroud that may concern you a little bit? A talk for us throughout the week has been mechanically he's off. And I look at that and I think to myself, that may be because of the amount of hits he's taken this year. So his throws are not as accurate as we have come to love from CJ Stroud. A lot of us put him up there as one of the more accurate quarterbacks in the NFL. I haven't really seen that this year. Underthrows, balls in the dirts. What is your concern right now with CJ Stroud? And do you feel like whatever your concern is, all of those things are fixable with a good off season?
Yeah, I mean, they are fixable. I think interior pass protection is going to be the number one priority this offseason. And two things can happen when a quarterback is under consistent pressure. We see it all the time from several quarterbacks throughout the league. One, they start to rush, right? They think they have to get rid of the ball even faster than they do, and it throws off the timing with the receivers and the way with the play designs are supposed to be. Two, it messes with their footwork and they start leaning away and they start kind of getting a little less precise in their footwork. And honestly, accuracy comes front footwork, right? People think, it's just their ability to throw the football and sling it wherever, but consistent accuracy comes from footwork. And when that's compromised, and you can see it on tape, and it's a gradual process too. It doesn't just happen one day. It's, 1 week he got sacked 8 times. Then the next week he's a little off and then a little more off. I saw this happen with Trevor Lawrence his rookie year. And it also takes time to get it back into the proper place. And now you see with Lawrence that their pass protection is back down from the higher level it was at 2 years ago. And it's a mess again, right? CJ Stroud, you don't want him to have to go through that whole process. So this year is going to be what it is because we're already this deep into it. But I think interior pass protection is the biggest reason for that inaccuracy and that lack of precise footwork. And that's going to be the priority in the offseason.
Yeah, that's exactly where I want to go to next right now. PFF has the Texans interior offensive line. That's one of the worst bunches in the NFL. Between Juice, Kenyon Green, I think, got the lowest offensive line rating that PFF has ever given out, or not the lowest, close to it. Shaq Mason has looked old this year. He's looked 2 steps slower. So, in your expertise, in your field, is this something that maybe Houston could look towards bringing in a vet? Do they go younger in the draft? Is it a coaching issue that, when you look on the film, you say, man, these guys can clean this up. They can be better. Or does the offensive line coach and 3 out of the 4 guys, especially the interior, does Houston need to revamp that entire group?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, when you have struggles at all 3 spots, you use all the avenues that you just mentioned. Now, it's not the best interior offensive line class in this draft. You're going to be talking about some day 2 picks when it comes to that. I don't think there's an interior offensive lineman that's going to get taken in the first round here. So you could see a trade back and maybe they take a volume approach and get multiple guys. We've seen teams even this offseason, like the Washington Commanders, sign several veterans and they've gotten production out of an offensive line. But when you have a need at all 3 of those spots and it's this bad, what you're really looking for is maybe not superstars, but average players, right? Your offensive line very often is as good as your weakest link. And the problem is the weakest link for the Texans right now is 3 guys instead of just 1. So I think they're going to use all of those avenues and throw a lot of darts at the wall to see what combination sticks. Because the good news is they're still set at tackle with Laramie Tunsil and Titus Howard, who have both played well this year. So this is really a very deep focus is going to come on these 3 spots, I think, through all avenues throughout the entire offseason.
You would make a change, maybe look at upgrading at right tackle. You think Titus has been, has he been a victim of Shaq Mason playing bad? Or because I don't think Titus has been the best this year.
He's not the best, but he is. I would throw him in the average category, right? And he's at least passable more so than the 3 guys inside, right? So, I mean, if you had a superstar at left tackle in Laramie Tunsil and 4 average players, you actually have a really good offensive line. That's kind of the thing is cutting down on the weaknesses. And I won't say Titus Howard is a weakness. Is he a superstar? No, he's not on that level with Lane Johnson and Penei Sewell and those guys. He's certainly not on that level, but he's at least a solid football player who does a passable job. They really need to fix the inside more than the right tackle spot.
I do want to go back to Bobby Sloyd. What is it about Bobby Sloyd this year, from your point of view, your perspective, that has led to a sophomore slump from an offensive coordinator? What's not working with this offense?
I think, first of all, you have to remember a bad offensive line is the biggest obstacle, I think, to calling plays and being a great offensive coordinator, because if nothing is blocked, really nothing works right now. I think the run game has worked well with Joe Mixon for most of the games this year, not this past game against Tennessee, but I just see a little bit less flow to it, right? A little bit less of those play action shots that we're used to seeing. I think with Nico Collins being injured, they had a hard time getting through that, because a lot of their passing game right now is based on Nico Collins finding matchups and being isolated. I think we're getting a little less consistent production, at least out of Tank Dell. It just feels like there's a little less flow to the entire thing, especially in the passing game. And they've fallen, they're getting in these situations in the second half where they have to drop back and throw the football. And with bad pass protection, that's always tougher. So I think the situation is harder. I think Slowick is still the right guy to be their offensive coordinator. And again, it's centered around that offensive line and just refining that rhythm as you're blocking people. And right now they're just not blocking people.
So do you think he comes back for another year for Houston? Is this just an event during the season that you feel like, they can get past that with Bobby Slowick? Because he was a hot coaching candidate for a head coaching spot last year. I think that ship has completely sailed. The talk around the town right now in Houston is they got to move on from Bobby, fire Bobby, take away his play calling duties. Do you think this is something that Bobby can get over and redeem himself in the future?
Yeah, I do. I don't see a reason personally to think that it's totally his fault or it's all the play calling. Again, it's so much harder when you can't block, especially on the interior. We saw Joe Mixon with 22 rushing yards in this past game. And look, the Titans have a good defensive line, so they're going to be hard to block. It's so much harder. It's a problem to me in the trenches with this roster more so than with Bobby Slowick. I think it would be a mistake to do that. I think you want the continuity with him and CJ Stroud, and you need to make improvements to the roster first before making any coaching changes there.
Now, before we talk about the bye week blessings that the Houston Texans can definitely benefit from, Dalton, we use PFF here on this show all the time. The breaking down of numbers, the analytics that sometimes we may overlook when we use our eye test. Some of those numbers actually matter to the game. And so you guys have a special deal going on for potential customers.
We do. We're running this week in honor of Black Friday, a 35% off promotion on a PFF Plus subscription where you can see all of the grades and data along with our fantasy tools, betting tools, and mock draft simulator. Use the code SCORE35 on pff.com/subscribe for 35% off a PFF Plus subscription through this coming Monday after Black Friday. 35% off. That's again SCORE35 as the code to apply for a PFF Plus subscription.
Make sure you guys check it out. We got more Locked On Texans on the way. Hey, Texan fans, are you ready to take your football experience to the next level with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook? They are here to make every Texans game and NFL games just more exciting. Right now, you can dive into the season's hottest Texans props and odds. The Texans are 5.5-point favorites in the Sunday game versus the Jags, and the total on the over-under is 43.5 points. So you can look to make some extra cash right there while you're watching your team and praying that they score a second half TD, because they're going to need it if you take the over on the 43.5 points. Y'all, FanDuel is also offering odds for the Texans' first scoring play, plus 160 for a touchdown, plus 320 for a field goal. And if you're feeling a little lucky, plus 10,000 if the Texans score first with a safety. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Dalton, you share a name with a tight end here in Houston that a lot of people have complained about, haven't seen a lot about, and I think that going into the bye week after the Texans play the Jags, they take on the Jags this Sunday. This is a very winnable game. However, we've seen the Houston Texans lose winnable games. The Jets, the Titans this past Sunday. How much of this offense is lacking more Dalton Schultz?
It is lacking a bit, and you're just seeing they just haven't found a consistent rhythm with him, right? And he's getting a similar target share that he did last year, but just not making as many explosive plays, right? It's just less efficient. You're not seeing just the downfield plays that you saw last year, especially in some big moments. And you talk about the last 2 games with under 40 yards in each game. It felt like he was a more consistent threat last year, especially over the middle of the field. And I know they've spread it out a little bit more this year, especially with Stephon Diggs coming in there, and they've really tried to open up the passing game. But I think involving Schultz more often and getting him working down the seams of this offense would help a lot when you talk about trying to control coverages and keeping guys off of Nico Collins and Tank Dell, and even keeping guys out of the running game. I think it's another big reason that the play action has suffered. I think Schultz is a really good play action threat down the seam if you can complement the running game with that. So I think it would help them to get Schultz more involved in this offense down the stretch.
You spoke on the running game, did not do well against Tennessee. A couple of games this year, teams have been able to kind of make it hard on Joe Mixon to get it going, and he's performed well with a poor offensive line. I think that's been the story of Joe Mixon's career, honestly. Didn't necessarily have a stud offensive line in Cincinnati, but has Joe Mixon been has his success hindered the play calling a little bit because he's been so reliable with bad offensive linemen in front of him. He's been able to make guys miss at the line of scrimmage. Tennessee did a good job of taking away the cutback lanes, but for the most part of this year, that's where we've seen Joe Mixon do the best of part of his game. Has his performance kind of hindered this offense in terms of making them more relaxed because they can lean on Joe and then just get into field goal range? We've seen that a lot in the second half.
See, I don't think so. I think his performance has really been a big asset. When you look at a lot of the best offensive games that they've had, it's been because they've been able to get balanced, right? And he's got, 600-yard games this season. And you're right, he's working through a bad offensive line. But I don't think any offensive coordinator is going to want to just willingly be one-dimensional. And look, are there stretches in games where maybe your offensive line is not blocking well and you have to feel it out and you do have to open it up with C.J. Stroud in the passing game? Absolutely. But last year, part of the beauty of the Texans offense was the balance and the play action shots that came off of it. I still think about the very first play they ran against the Colts in week 18, right? With the deep shot off play action. It always helps to have a good running game. I think it's just more a product, again, of the interior of the offensive line struggling, right? And if they're struggling in the run game, it's going to be inconsistent production for Mixon, which we've seen because he's got 600-yard games and he's got 3 games under 50 yards. So I don't think it's hindered the play calling so much as maybe not in the sense of, they're running too much because of, Mixon's been good, so we're trying to get him to pop off big plays. But it's you run into a game like this Tennessee game where, okay, they made us one-dimensional. And if your offensive line is playing like this, then you just run the risk of being more one-dimensional. I think it's actually the dangerous part is being so ineffective that now they have to avoid running the football because any team can beat you if you're one-dimensional.
That's a good point. Going into the bye week, the Houston Texans, after they take on the Jags, of course, they got some things they need to figure out. Jalen Petrie will be he'll be missing some games with an injury. Eventually, they'll get Christian Harris back. He's been a player that we necessarily haven't heard a lot about his injury or got too many updates that's encouraging. Defensively, they are a top defense in the NFL, top 5 in the league right now. But obviously, there's some concerns with how their secondary can hold up. Going into the bye week, what do you think D'Amico and his staff needs to do to maximize some of those players on their defense that shouldn't play the amount of snaps that they may be prepared to play?
Yeah, I agree. You have a lot of young kids back there, right? So there can be some high variance to it. And I think a couple of things just across the board, you're not seeing Derek Stingley have quite as good a year as he did last year first. And he's still been solid, but not quite the elite year he had last year. And I see, they run so much zone coverage that there's been some communication issues, like you saw with the long touchdown to Nick Westbrook-Akine in this last game. Communication issues. I was talking to somebody about this earlier in the week who, they were breaking down the coverage for me and how it works is a little different tweak in the way that the Texans were running it, and they just didn't execute it. Because secondary play, look, people forget. They think defense is just reacting and hitting people. It does come down to execution too, and there's no doubt the Texans have a lot of great players. I think Kamari Lassiter on the other side has been really good for a rookie, right? But at times you still have that thing where you have to execute and you have to work as a team. So I think in the secondary, it's a matter of just a lot of young guys, plus Jimmy Ward, obviously, just executing at a little bit higher level, especially with as much zone coverage as the Texans run.
I think Derek Stingley has been elite this year. I think he's been an all-pro player. He got beat against Keyshawn Butte against New England, but since that game, I think he's been on a tear. A lot of teams are not necessarily targeting him that much, and when they do, especially we look at that Dallas game, albeit that's Cooper Rush and not Dak Prescott out there. That was one of those games where you can go back and say, man, he really he locked that CeeDee Lamb up. He locked that player up. But for the Texans overall, the growing thought is they'll win the division. They won't make a real playoff run. Is that a case right now for you? Do you think Houston can fix some things in the bye week that will allow them to propel themselves in a more respectable tier of teams that'll make you think, you know what, maybe they can go to Pittsburgh and beat the Steelers. Maybe when they come back, maybe they can take on Baltimore and Houston or Kansas City on the road. Maybe they can pull out a win against one of those elite teams.
So the big problem, the big obstacle for me with that is trench play on both sides of the ball. We've gone a lot about the interior pass protection with this team, and you're talking about teams with serious threats in the playoffs when you talk about their pass rush. The Chiefs, obviously, with Chris Jones, the Ravens with Justin Madubuike and those guys, Pittsburgh with their freak defensive line. You've got teams, even the Chargers defensive line is playing a lot better if you have to play them. These teams are really good in the trenches, and the Texans are not. Now, on the other side of the ball, you've got Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson, who are playing extremely well off the edge. But for us, the Texans don't have another defensive lineman with a grade above 60. And 60 in our grading scale is basically right at net neutral, where if you're below that, you're kind of having a negative impact, and above is a positive. No other defensive lineman is above that. On the interior and the defensive line as well, it's been a real struggle. I think this is going to be a problem when you talk about these offensive lines like the Ravens and Derrick Henry in this run game, right? If you had to face them, or the Chargers want to run the football, or the Kansas City Chiefs with arguably the best interior offensive line in football. I think there's a lot of matchup problems on both sides of the ball in the trenches with several other of these AFC teams. So if that doesn't get fixed, and if you have a day where your stars in Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson don't play well, I'm a little worried about their defensive line in these matchups as well.
So how do you guys go about that grading scale? I got to push back just a little bit. I feel like, of course, with Danico Autry playing some good football for Houston, he's getting things going. Houston to get Foley Fadakowski back. But between Foley and Tim Settle Jr., those two guys have done a great job this year being the perfect pieces to playing on the inside of a Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. But they don't necessarily have the grades consistently to back that up. So what goes into that grading scale for those players?
So it's a combination of things, and with those two guys specifically, they've definitely been better as pass rushers, especially Settle, 28 pressures and 5 sacks for us this year. I think as pass rushers, they'll be fine, especially when you have such threats like Hunter and Anderson out there on the outside. I'm more worried about the run defense, right? So the overall grades, when I talk about, okay, they're below 60, that's the overall. But you're talking about as pass rushers, first of all, their effectiveness there and the quality of their wins, the quickness of their wins, and then their ability to get to the quarterback, obviously. It's the run defense part that I worry more so. Those are a couple of guys with really low run defense grades in the 30s, and that's very nuanced when it comes to, look, we watch all these games over twice, once on the broadcast, once on the All-22, once we get that in. And that's a lot about alignment, assignment, where are you supposed to be? Are you filling your gap? Are you getting across and beating your blocker and making plays on the football? So all those things go into it. So you're right. I think as pass rushers, I think they've been solid. They've been very solid complements to Hunter and Anderson. And when the Texans have a lead, I think their defense is extremely dangerous, especially with all the stars in the secondary and the pass rush. It's run defense that I would worry about more with these guys up front, especially in the interior. When you're playing a Steelers team that wants to run the ball, the Chiefs want to run the ball down the pipe, the Ravens, obviously, with Derrick Henry, the Chargers. There's a lot of teams that want to run the football in the AFC, despite all the big-name quarterbacks, and I think that's where I'm most concerned with the Texans right now.
That is Dalton Wasserman of the PFF family. Thank you for stopping by. Please let our listeners know where they can find all of your great work, and again, let them know about the PFF Black Friday deal that you guys will be having going on.
Absolutely. PFF.com for all our great written content from myself and all our great analysts. And again, that is Score 35 for 35% off a PFF Plus subscription through Cyber Monday. And then on YouTube, the PFF NFL show, which I'm on Monday afternoons, and the PFF College Football show, which I'm on Sundays and Tuesdays.
Thank you for stopping by, Dalton. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, John.
Thank you guys for watching today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment to the podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. And give me a follow on Twitter at John_Hickman12 and on Instagram at Some Sports Guy.
You can follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Big Star Sports with a Z at the end.
Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.
I got to go watch the Rockets. I think I'm supposed to